one at a time, and we'll get the job done. Y'all know what to say. On three. 1, 2, 3.
And the home of the Jets.
What's going on, everybody? Let's talk Jets with a very special guest, the man from NBC, SNY, Badlands, PFF. Is there anything you don't do, Connor?
Listen, I stay busy. I like it that way, Tyson. I appreciate you, man. Thanks for the nice intro, and I'm really glad to be on. It's been a minute. We were saying off air. It's been a little while.
You know, and that's the really cool thing, man, is like, you know, I've known you a while, and to see where you're at now, man, like, how has this journey been, man? It's got to be like a dream come true, right?
It really is, especially the fact that I get to do all these awesome things, right? The fantasy content at NBC, the draft content at NBC, the Mets pod, but I still get to keep my baby with the Jets coverage, and it's only grown into more and more that I'm so lucky I get to do with Jets pre and post game with the guys at SMY, obviously still getting to do Badlands with Joe. Joe and I have been podcasting about the Jets since I was in college, and I'm 31 years old now. So it makes me laugh how much time flies and how awesome it is. And something I hope that I never have to give up, because as sick as we are, I love talking about this team.
Well, that's what I was talking to Joe last week, and it was so wild because I'm like, to see where everybody is now and to see where the team is now, just to see how you establish yourself, man. It's like,
thanks, man.
To see like what you can do from a perspective of a Jet fan, which is even better. Sometimes like analysts don't care about the Jets because they're not a fan. So they give you some kind of like, you know, some kind of knowledge. Like, dude, you're not a fan. You don't know the pain that we feel. So
it is unique. And I think I got a little fortunate of the timing, right? When I started to try to figure out how to work in sports, which I had no intentions of doing for the longest time. I didn't graduate in sports broadcasting or anything like that. I was working in business. The Jets were unfortunately bad for a while. And my love of the draft, it kind of coincided where the team I grew up loving and what I was trying to do full time with the draft just really cross paths in the biggest intersection possible for maybe too many years. We didn't like it to be that many years. We were saying this is the first draft in a while that we're like, okay, this isn't going to be, you know, totally game changing, but I think that really helped as well. And it's led to a lot of great things for me that I'm super thankful for. And it's great that, you know, a fan base that I started my sports career just by interacting with this fan base, that those interactions have only grown closer and more significant over time.
And I think that's the one really cool thing you always did, man, was you always went on all the Jet shows, all like the fan shows, like our show you came on a bunch of times, but like you were never
Yeah,
that's so cool though, dude. 'Cause some people aren't like that. Once you get to a certain level, like, listen, man, I have no time for this. You know, like it's awesome.
You know what it is too? People are so good working with me. I do get to the point now, not now because it's July. I was BSing with you. It's like I'm down the shore right now. Like I love this time of year. You know, during the season, it could be crazy when we're doing the fantasy show 5 days a week. I'm at game day. I'm at SMY doing Jets pre and post, which is the entire day. You know, when you wake up, you go to sleep, whenever that is. And I obviously watch college football on Saturdays, my one day off because of the draft coverage. That it's, you know, there's a lot of times where it's you're not lying. You're just like, man, I don't have a lot of calendar right now. And you know, people always are so willing to move things and work with me. And I love doing this. So if it's, you know, 8:00 on a weeknight, or if it's, you know, 8 a.m. on a whatever weekend or whatever, you always find a way because you love it.
Now, what's the biggest challenge being a Jet fan, like covering the Jets and then having to give insight? Do you have to like kind of like, you know, inside, like, you know what, I can't stand this, but do you have to kind of walk a fine line sometimes?
Yeah, I think the thing I'm learning with pre and post that's not new to me, but it's been something that's gradually grown with the draft, but definitely a pre and post too, is you do want to walk the fine line of how harsh you are on one person, whether that's a coach or a player, or it could be something all the way from ownership to scouting to everything in the building. You try to really be fair and rational, but you also have a responsibility. And I'll never change who I was, a kid on Twitter how many years ago, right? Calling things out, because I think that's why people enjoyed listening to me. So I'm never going to change who I am, but you also do want to be a balance of, okay, let's not completely just, you know, kill someone this week and completely overlook all these other things, even though they matter a lot too. And then, so I think that's part of it too. And I think the second thing, this might be a lot more interesting to me, is because the Jets, yes, it didn't end the way we wanted to, but the Jets had a lot of high moments last year that, you know, we weren't accustomed to seeing with young players, right? They had the offensive and defensive rookie of the year, and what those guys were doing week in and week out was so special. And you want to amplify that And you do have I stopped. I don't really care about this, but you do always wonder, like, are people going to think I'm being a homer, or are people actually going to listen to me and understand what these guys doing actually is special? I'm not just saying this because of my Jets perspective. So I think that's been an interesting thing. You have to paint the picture with even more detail, stats, analytics, numbers, because then people will go, well, there's no disputing that. He's not just saying it because he was a fan or anything like that. It's just the truth.
No, 100%, man. That's what, when you have the facts and numbers and you have the perspective behind it, it's like, all right, this isn't like green colored glasses. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah,
That's
I
the
mean,
most important thing.
I could I could say to somebody like, oh, we haven't seen a rookie corner like Sauce Gardner. And they'll be like, well, you're saying that because it's a Jets, viewpoint. And then you go, well, Sauce Gardner is top 2 in the league in yards, allowed per route, alongside the likes of the greatest corners in the game, better than Jalen Ramsey, better than Patrick Surtain. And everyone's like, oh, that's a little different. So I think I'm really lucky that I'm in a position where I can have those discussions and they seem meaningful, right? I think that's a really nice thing. And it's, Jets fans haven't had a lot to root for over this last decade. And I think it's great that you can tell them, or, try to, be honest with them. Like, this is something that is special and you can root for. And it's time to be excited. I mean, if you can't be excited now, when can you be excited?
100%, man. I agree. Like, if you're complaining now, like you haven't
You're in
lived
the
the last
wrong
20 years.
hobby. It's a bad hobby for you. I always say that, like, baseball is too long of a season for a lot of people that are baseball fans. It's a similar thing where it's like, if you can't find the joy and excitement now, and you're just kind of dealing with the dread, maybe this isn't for you.
So now, before we go into this year's team, what made you a Jet fan?
I mean, I was born into it. It's as simple as that. My dad and my uncle had season tickets since Shea. And so I was basically, since my mom would allow him to take me to a game, I was going. Maybe 4 years old, I think, was the first time I was in the Meadowlands. And it started out with like, okay, only preseason games. And then you get to a certain age and it's like, okay, regular season, but no prime time. Because you probably remember this, like the Meadowlands, and I'm not talking MetLife for those listening that only know MetLife and their Jets existence. Prime time at the Meadowlands was a different animal. And I, eventually started doing that too. So I was born into it where, I'd be able to go to usually a preseason game and at least one regular season game with my dad. And that, I mean, what more did you need to see, right? I remember security was so cool, especially at the Meadowlands. I remember as a kid, like, as long as, my dad would be like, hey, like, I got my son with me, like, can we go down? You can go down during warmups. Players would interact with you. You just get to watch warmups, and it's, when you're like 5 or 6 years old and you're seeing these guys, they're the highest level of professional athlete. It's incredible to watch, and I fell in love with football. And of course, and a lot of people forget, because I'm sure you deal with this too. Like, you have a lot of young listeners, going to those games in the early 2000s and stuff. The Jets were awesome plenty of times. Like, they were an exciting. You had so many great players to root for, going from Keyshawn and Corbett to Moss and Lavernius, and then you had obviously the Rex years, which was just Revis in his prime. One of the greatest Jets you'll ever get to see in person. So there was a lot to root for. It wasn't like you were going out there and watching, it's so harsh to say, but like Bryce Petty starting a game. It's like, it wasn't like that. It mattered a lot. So I think that's where, my dad kind of led me in, but he didn't really have to try too hard. I absolutely love the team and love football immediately.
So now, I mean, we're both diehard fans, man. This year is probably the most anticipated year in probably a decade, because Aaron Rodgers is here, but there's some storylines going in the training camp. And to me, I guess the first one's going to be the whole Quinn Williams contract, where I kind of thought it should have been done already. I thought the longer the Jets waited, he may want more money. Maybe they're arguing over years. Are you surprised it's gotten to this point? And do you think it gets done before camp?
I am a little surprised. I guess the part where I'm not is that we've seen Joe Douglas specifically operate this way, where he'll gladly, drag his feet on things to maybe get what he wants, or set a precedent, is what a lot of people don't realize, that this is the way we always do things, and we're not going to move a needle for a certain player, whether you agree or disagree, and we'll get there. And then you have the Quinn side. It's been a really busy offseason for his agency. They did the Jalen Hurts deal. They've had a ton of success, and his brother got a nice contract with the Jets to stay as well, which was a big part of this. I think what, I don't want to say bothers me, but has me looking at it and going, this shouldn't be very difficult. I always say it like if a dummy like me at home could figure it out with over the cap and Google, the Jets and Quinn Williams should figure it out. And I think they will, by the way. You look at the extensions for Dexter Lawrence across town with the Giants, Jeffrey Simmons with the Titans, Daron Payne with Washington. Those are now 3 of the top 5 paid defensive tackles in the NFL. similar age, similar production. You could have all those combos, but it's all close, right?
Yep.
I mean, Quinnen has now a spectrum set, a low and a high, and it's pretty tight. It's not like you're looking at maybe 20 million guaranteed, maybe 80 million guaranteed. It's maybe 57 million guaranteed, maybe 64 guaranteed. Like that's a pretty tight metric right there. And then when you look at, the fact that it could also be this, we don't know what side's asking for more, right? Are the Jets, trying to, I think Rich Cimini, I want to say somebody floated out there that the hang up could have been length of deal. Yep. You have to realize Quinnen being 25, 26 might want to take a deal that runs him until he's 29. And then when you're 29 and you're a top 5 D tackle in football, you cash in again. That cash in is, you could be looking at 2 $100 million deals in a lifetime. That's special, special stuff. And if you're the Jets, you're kind of going, well, we'd rather maybe get the 5 years. And when you're 30, we'll reevaluate this. But, we don't, paying a 29-year-old in the NFL is much different from paying a guy 30 or on the wrong side of 30. So I think there's going to be adults in the room that figure this out. He's too good. This year's too important. And it's also, you remember the Mo Wilkerson situation where it was kind of a will they, won't they for so long. And there was a lot going on there. There was justified questions of if Mo is a guy that you could trust to pay. Will he be the same guy after being paid? And unfortunately, he wasn't. Nope. We got those answers. And but it was also, he's a star player in his prime, drafted by the team, homegrown talent that you want to keep. And, the Jets obviously made the decision to keep him and it didn't work out. Quinnen's not like that. Quinnen, there's no questions off the field. He's been here through really bad times. He didn't come in as like a front runner when everything was great. He came in here when things were at a low point, wrote it out, got better, developed, found a scheme under Robert Saleh that is tailor-made for him to be a superstar. And we saw that last year. Year 2 of Quinnen and Robert Saleh was like, jet fuel kind of situation. Yeah. So it just makes so much sense for both sides to get this done. He doesn't want to be anywhere else, and the Jets don't want him to be anywhere else.
Yeah, to me, it's just a no-brainer at this point. It's like the locker room's looking at it too. Like Sauce and Garrett Wilson's like, you know what? This is one of our guys. Did the right thing. The whole play like a Jet thing, getting better, young, stay out of trouble. So this is like, all right, if you're not going to pay him and play games with him, what are you going to do with us? So I think it's just,
it matters a lot.
It does, right?
It matters a lot. And I think the Jets have started to turn that, distasteful narrative around with some things like the acquisition of Rodgers, right? That's the cash that costs. A lot of people don't realize that. Like, yes, you figure out the cap logistics and how to make this work the next couple of years. Even when he's not on the roster, you have to make that work. But the amount of cash that, Woody Johnson and the business side need to figure out, they put all that aside and said, we don't care what it costs from our pockets. Aaron Rodgers needs to be here. And that's a good precedent to set because you care about winning, which is something that at times I've been vocal about this. I've always wondered, not always wondered, but when appropriate, I have wondered how much the Jets care about winning. And now it feels like they really do. And you look at, like you said, the Quinnen deal, that kind of sets something for the young guys because this is a player that has 5th-year option picked up, has really rode out those 4 years. And if you do everything you're supposed to, carry yourself the right way for the franchise, turn to a superstar player and help the team win football games, you should get yours. And Quinnen's due to get his, just like we think one day Garrett Wilson and Sauce Gardner will be due as well.
No, I completely agree. Now, where do you stand with the whole Dalvin Cook scenario, man, where I'm kind of in the situation where I'll be completely transparent with you. This is something you said as well, dude. And I was like, completely agree. It's like, I'm a huge Breece Hall fan, but I'm worried about Breece Hall playing in, December, January, end of season being the best he can be, as opposed to worrying about week 1. So Dalvin Cook to me is an upgrade over Michael Carter, Bam Knight, everything else. And if he only wants $6 million a year, I'm like, I'm all in with Aaron Rodgers. I'm like, it's just, to me, it makes sense. I'm like, I'm not worried about salary cap stuff. You can manipulate that. Where do you stand with that?
I think it's the perfect way to frame it is the conversation's not about, the conversation isn't about, is he Dalvin Cook, right? The conversation is about, is he an upgrade over what we have that the group of guys that need to get us by when Breece is ramping back up. And the reality of Breece's injury, the ramp up is not now. It's probably not training camp. It's maybe September if everything's perfect. Realistically, the ramp up is in October. And I'm not saying he's not going to play in September, but I mean ramping up to being Breece Hall, not just a running back that gets the ball 6 times a game. And you want Breece Hall for the second half of the season more so than running him into the ground in the first half and risking a lot of other issues to come with that. So the conversation is, how do we get the prime Dalvin Cook? It's how do we upgrade the back end of our running back room, because these guys might need a significant workload while our superstar is making his way back. And also with Breece Hall, it's not a lot of things, right, Tyson, and I agree with you, are about this year. But for Breece Hall, a lot of things aren't about this year. Breece Hall is a Jet for the long term and what we think will be a promising 2024 outlook as well, especially if Aaron Rodgers comes back. So I think that I'm with you, like a 1 year, $6 million deal. And maybe the base of that is $4 and $2 million of incentives. Is for people listening and thinking Dalvin Cook's getting north of $8-9 million. Like, that day is past. Every team has an analytics department. It's not the lack of value at the running back position. It's also that he's an average running back right now. He's not a great running back, but an average running back for the Jets would be great if you bring that in, because we saw a step back from Michael Carter last year, which was disappointing. Bam Knight, kind of your ideal RB3 because he could return kicks and he could be the depth guy, but you don't really want to rely on him too much. I love Izzy Abanikanda, their 5th round pick this year from Pitt, but he's also a 20-year-old rookie. I mean, relying on him this year, it's one of those, you get into camp, maybe the kid surprises you and you're like, well, we're good. Like we got our Dalvin Cook, and he's that outside zone kind of runner too, but he's a 20-year-old that, might need some time. He might need some refining as well. So, and then you also have to wonder, every time you turn on the TV, every time you open Twitter, every time you read any kind of report, all you hear is that Dalvin Cook wants to go home to Miami. I mean, good for him if that's the case. But if you're the Jets, why are you, building his own leverage and getting, sure, you want to build Miami to pay more because they're a division rival, but still, you want to know if it's the guy in or is he out? It's as simple as that. And
100%.
We haven't heard that yet. I would think he goes to whoever gives him the most money, because that's how life often works. But I definitely think it's a situation that his preferences are pretty well known.
Yeah, no, I agree. And this is, I guess, the next question is an easy one is, if you go anywhere on Twitter, it's probably a daily thing where everybody's like, bring back Quan Alexander. And I think, to me, it seems a little bit more important once Chuck Clark went out for the year. So I feel like Chuck Clark could be kind of a hybrid guy, kind of move around. Now it's like Quan seems like, and this is no disrespect to Jamie and Sherwood or anything like that. I just think Quan, what he is, man. Been there, done that, been in the defense, leader, good guy in the locker room. Salah always praises him. You're always praising him. If you give him a pay raise, dude, it's not going to be big. He wasn't making a lot last year, right? Like
With Quan, it's number one, it's a little surprising he's still out there because he's still a young player, really good player. Now I'll say this, it goes back to the Jets also being a good thing for him. When you look at his advanced numbers, he was one of the more efficient linebackers in the NFL in his role. If you put Quan Alexander on the field 90% of the snaps of the game, does that efficiency remain as high as it's been? I don't think so, because like you said, he is kind of that hybrid defender that Chuck Clark would have a lot of responsibility playing downhill and playing in the box. And when the Jets want to get lighter and they want to go into a pass defense mode, you could put Quan on the field kind of as that real run and chase, cover the flats, cover more space, run up the seam, but also not sacrifice a ton against the run. He's not a 0 against the run because he has such good speed. We know he could hit. So I think when you look at it, the Jets right now, if you want to nitpick a great defense, it is the middle of the defense. And that took another blow with the Chuck Clark injury. Well, then how can you beef it up? What is Quan going to cost, right? $2 million, maybe less with incentives in it. And I think Quan, you feel for the player because it feels like he did this last year. Then he had to take a prove it deal, and he chose right. He went to the perfect scheme for him, the perfect coach. And to Quan's credit, he played as well as you could have asked for on such a low number. And then he probably thought, I did everything I had to do. Our defense was really good. I now everyone knows how to use me. He goes to the free agency market, and there seems to be no bites again. So if you're the Jets, you have cap space. You love the player. Everybody loves the player in the locker room. He is, exactly how to use him and not overuse him or underuse him. Call me crazy. I think Quan is more of a no-brainer than Dalvin Cook in terms of just I think it's what both sides should want.
No, I completely agree, man. I completely agree with everything you said there. So you go from like the potential signings to, I think the biggest story for me going to training camp, and that's going to be the offensive line, where it's like there's potential, but there's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Dwayne Brown at left tackle, how healthy is he? When's he going to be ready? Laken Tomlinson, will he be better than last year? Because last year he was terrible. Who's going to be the center? AVT coming back from injury. And then Mekhi Becton at right tackle, if he wants to play right tackle. Like, right? The offensive line you can feel good and you can feel bad about it. I'm kind of like a little bit nervous about it at this point.
Right. It feels like they have so much depth, and I'm not saying it's above average depth. It's probably more on the mediocre side that they're trying to just set a floor, right? Last year, the floor was below the basement. I mean, we saw what happened when they lost a lot of guys and it all fell apart. And I think young quarterbacks didn't make that better because there's just not things they see pre-snap. They weren't sliding protection. They were creating their own pressure, but single-handedly, the offensive line was really bad as well when they dealt with a lot of injuries too. So you can evaluate things in a vacuum. Now, this year, when you get the Billy Turners of the world, right, the Wes Schweitzers of the world, like those are capable backup linemen. You do start to build a floor, but I think what you're saying, and I totally agree with this, is what is the ceiling of this offensive line, right? Like, what does it look like with a healthy Dwayne Brown, which he wasn't last year, and credit to him for playing with one shoulder. Laken Tomlinson, more the middle of Laken Tomlinson. The year before he signed with the Jets was the high end. The year he played with the Jets last year was the low end. You're right. He really really struggled. So can you get somewhere to the middle center? I mean, Tippmann and McGovern are going to battle it out. That's going to be fascinating. AVT, he'll be good coming back from the triceps. He is just such an exceptional player. I don't worry about him. Right tackle, man, maybe the biggest variable on the team, honestly. When you look at it, you have Becton that has all-pro talent and all-pro flashes and has not played much football really in 2 years, which is just – and the unhappiness of, everything that he was very vocal about in an article. And, now how does that carry over to training camp? Max Mitchell, who was okay last year, I don't think he ever should have been thrusted into that situation to have to play. And, they've drafted depth as well. That there are so many bodies on this line, but you really do wonder if everyone's healthy, what is the ceiling? Can Becton get back to rookie form? Can Dwayne Brown stay healthy? Can Laken, once again, not be a Pro Bowler, but at least be an average starter? It's going to be really, really interesting because that group matters so much for two simple reasons. One, protecting an MVP caliber quarterback that was not protected last year and got hurt, and we saw what happened there. And then number two, you're going to be winning a lot of football games. You know how you close them out? Running the ball. Running the football. And we don't know what that group will look like yet. But if they can get it together, find chemistry, and close out games, the Jets will win a lot of games. But that's a big question right now.
Now, what were your thoughts on the team taking Tippmann, man? Because I think once we all wanted the center for the last 3 years. I think every year, like every draft season, everybody we wanted became a Pro Bowler, obviously too. But everybody wanted JMS. And I thought it was a slam dunk, to be honest with you. And they go out and they get Tippmann. I'm like, wait a minute, what? Because the height concerns. And you see more about it. I watched your analysis and everybody else. But were you surprised they went after Tippmann?
I was. The thing is, I should never be shocked when a team values athleticism above all. I thought JMS had a really high floor. He's somebody that he's very strong in a phone booth. He's very smart. He's played 1 million snaps of college football. I think he's a 4-year starter. He's done so much for that Minnesota program that it felt like there was a floor with JMS that the Jets have been missing on the offensive line for a long time. With Tippmann, there's a lot more variance, right? He's a way better athlete. He's a bigger player. He can do things athletically in the run game that JMS just can. I remember going through all the offensive line before this draft with a coach in the NFC. He was saying just how much he just like, I wish JMS just had a little bit more explosiveness because there's going to be things in the run game that I want to do that we won't be able to ask him to do. And I remember when he loved the player, but he just knew there was limitations. You just wonder after that conversation, I look at it and go, maybe Nathaniel Hackett was looking at kind of a similar thing in the Jets room of there's a lot of different run concepts that we're going to ask of these guys, and they got to be able to get out of the gate and move. And Tippmann can do that. Now, are there bigger risk with Tippmann? Of course. I mean, he's torn both shoulders. I believe he's had labrum surgery on both. Now, credit to him. He plays through everything, but a guy that's been banged up. There's not a lot of centers in the NFL that are 6 feet, 6 inches tall, and that is because of leverage. You're snapping the ball, and you got to play as low as you can. Credit to him. It didn't really affect him at college, but it only gets a little harder leverage at the NFL level. So it's a really fascinating balance. I respect taking a swing in the draft, and I do think Tippmann will be a fine NFL player. But comparing those two, especially with the Jets and Giants for the next couple of years, you know everybody's going to be doing it.
Oh, 100%. Jet fans are doing it already. They're already.
Yeah.
Everybody's already.
From OTAs videos.
They saw Tippmann play guard one time. Like, oh, he's a guard now. He's not a center. What are they doing? They're crazy. Like,
yeah.
But that's his versatility. So the last piece on the offense, we'll talk Rodgers in a little bit, is the wide receiver group where you have a starter making a Garrett Wilson, but then you have a lot of complementary pieces where me being greedy, I'm like, you know what? I almost wish we had somebody else that went after Beckham. Doesn't seem like Hopkins wants to come here. Do you think they still need a piece? Because my concern is, I'm surprised Corey Davis is still here, but my concern is you're one Garrett Wilson injury away from starting to panic a little bit. Am I crazy, or am I just being like, I want too many superstars?
When you frame it like that, I mean, that's totally fair, right? But I guess the thing is, if you say that about anyone that's number one around the league, a lot of teams run into the same issue. So it's, I'll say this, and, not to be like, oh, this is defending the Jets side of things. It's hard to get those big dogs to sign somewhere where the day they're signing, the targets are, you're fighting for scraps at the table. Yeah. It's really hard. Odell would have signed here. Absolutely. The Ravens came in with an offer that just blew everyone out of the water, and because they had to, because they didn't have anyone. Yep. And, you look at somebody like Hopkins. I mean, he's somebody that commands a lot of targets. That he's not going to command, I don't think, double-digit targets in this offense, and that's probably why it just never felt like much of a match. So there's a couple of things here. One, you have a really solid room. Garrett Wilson, they like Corey Davis a lot. They like Allen Lazard. They feel like those two can block like crazy and not sacrifice much in the pass game. They are going to use McCole Hardman a lot more than people realize, and I think that's the variable, is that they've lacked that field stretcher, right? When they drafted Mims, they thought that was him. It hasn't worked at all. He has not been able to stretch the field to really play a lot. Berrios was too small to stretch the field. Elijah Moore was too small to stretch the field. They have speed, those two guys, but to consistently win over the top, I think with Hardman, they think he has some vertical ability. They like his ability with the ball in his hands off of screens and pitch passes and jet motion. So I think Hardman has a bigger role in this offense. And then I'll say this, the guy in camp that I'm excited to watch is UDFA Jason Brownlee. I think he's got the contested catch ability to knock Mims off the roster. So I totally get what you're saying. I think this is a team that they like their tight end room, where those guys are going to eat and do enough targets that they probably looked at it and go, we're just not going to run a lot of 4 wide and empty sets. We're going to have tight ends on the field because we don't want to give up much in the trenches. We want to be able to block. Right. And Rodgers likes his tight ends in the short area. Look at his relationship with Robert Tonyan in Green Bay as well. So it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't, because if Garrett Wilson gets hurt, you wish you did. But if he doesn't, and you brought that guy in, would some people be unhappy, or would the offense not function as free-flowing as you want it to be?
Now, and you go on the defensive side of the ball, it's interesting because there's so many celebrities, superstars and big names.
They are celebrities.
They are celebrities too, right? But the one question I have for you is the run defense, man. You mentioned up the middle, like the defense up the middle. Yeah. Do you have any concerns? They lost Rankins, and they tried to replace him with a couple different players. Are you any concerned with the run defense being stout up the middle so they can actually get after the quarterback then?
I was terrified until they signed Al Woods. That was the big thing for me. When they went into the draft, and this draft had really not much interior defensive line help right away, I was looking at this and going, man, you're kind of thrusting Solomon Thomas into a role that he showed you he couldn't do last year. He was really bad against the run. You play him inside. You can't ask him to 2-gap and contain. It's not his game. Now you bring in Al Woods. He's you know what he is. He's going to stop the run. He's a run stuffer. He holds at the point of attack, and it allows everybody to play free flowing. So when you look at the rotation of Al Woods and Quentin Jefferson, ironically, both played for Seattle last year. You got the run stuffer in Al Woods. You got the pass rusher in Quentin Jefferson. They're going to play next to the workhorse in Quinn Williams. They'll mix in Solomon Thomas when they need to. And then you got this stable of pass rushers that they're going to want to flood the field with Lawson, Will McDonald, Jermaine Johnson. They really like his ability against the run. Yep. And, of course, the closer in Bryce Huff. So I think at linebacker, it puts a lot of pressure on CJ, but CJ's been built to do that. Losing Chuck Clark hurts, but they are stout now in the middle of the field with Al Woods, as long as they keep him in that rotational role and they don't deal with the scary injury of one of those two top guys inside.
And you mentioned the pass rushers. It's funny. The Jets went having from no pass rushers at all that we were begging. We're always talking. We reference John Abraham probably every year for like 10 years.
So long.
To then now they have a zillion pass rushers. And it seems like Will McDonald is the first round pick nobody's talking about. Like he's not even a thought because you have Carl Lawson and Huff. What were your thoughts on the pick of McDonald?
A good place to be for Will McDonald. You don't come in and have to be a savior for the Jets like every other first-round pick. It felt like it's had to be.
Yep.
Listen, in a vacuum, the player, very productive college player. He was in my top 30. I thought he was worthy of a first-round selection. When they used him as that wide 9 rusher or even that, true 5-tech kind of player or at the 7, like he gets off the ball and beats tackles with speed, and he knows how to counter inside. He's still figuring out how to stop the run. Great for Will McDonald. He went to a place that he won't be asked to do that. They're going to use him in a pat. I mean, what we saw them do with Bryce Huff last year is what they will do with Will McDonald this year, and they'll crank things up for Bryce Huff a little bit. They'll put a little bit more on his plate now. So you look at this pass rush group that was, and I forgot to mention John Franklin Myers when I was talking about this team up front in the middle. Bryce Huff was the most efficient pass rusher in terms of win rate. Then JFM, he was actually more efficient than guys like Quinnen and Lawson, and those guys were really, really good. The way you can move these guys around, JFM and Clemens are big defensive ends. You like Will McDonald and Carl Lawson and Bryce Huff being able to kind of rush really wide, even Jermaine Johnson as well. Quentin Al Woods, Quentin Jefferson, Solomon Thomas, they play inside. I mean, these guys are so interchangeable. They have so much versatility that I think they'll feed off of each other, and it'll set up Will McDonald for an efficient rookie season. He doesn't need to come in and be a 12-sack guy. He's not going to get the pass rush snaps to do that, but in terms of a guy that can his win rate be at 15%, which would be phenomenal, and can he maybe, get 5 to 6 sacks, 2 strip sacks, and have a lot of quarterback hits and pressures like Huff did last year? And you don't even need him to be that because there's so much talent here. But if he is, man, Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich can have fun for days. They can just keep rotating these guys. They got fresh guys ready to roll every single series against this pass-happy league.
Yeah, especially if they're playing with a lead. They can do all kinds of
and that's the thought process, right? The thought process is we are going to be better. We got the quarterback. We're going to be playing with the lead, and we are going to be not playing in a lot of these heavy sets. We're going to be able to be lighter on the field because teams are going to have to throw against us. And if teams are going to throw against us, we need speed, length, and bend off the edge. And, Bryce Huff has bend. He doesn't have length. Lawson has power, but he doesn't have length and bend. Jermaine Johnson has a lot of tools, but they're trying to really work on that with him. Will McDonald brought a skill set to them, very Randy Gregory-ish, that they didn't have, that Robert Saleh is obsessed with. And Robert Saleh's had a lot of success with throughout his NFL career, even before the Jets.
Now, what are your thoughts on the safety position, man, where you have Jordan Whitehead coming back? A lot of people thought he may be gone based on his salary and how he played last year. You had the injury to Clark. It seems like the Jets are high on Tony Adams. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on that. But what are your thoughts on the position, man? Is that kind of like maybe the one hole in the defense, you think?
I think so. I mean, we saw it last year. LaMarcus Joyner had some problems. Whitehead had some issues as well. I think it's tough for the Jets because they thought they had the glue guy coming in with Chuck Clark, the guy that can get everyone lined up. He's really smart. He's so sturdy and reliable. He's a good tackler, and nobody will be out of place. And then you lose that guy. So then you bring in Adrian Amos and hope he could do the same thing. But we don't know. We're kind of hoping he could be the same guy, and it'll allow Whitehead to play a little bit more loose and explosive. So I think they're missing that ball-hawking, rangy safety. And if Tony Adams can be that, I can't sit here and confidently say, like, oh, they didn't need that because they have Tony Adams, right? Like, let's see what he could do in a bigger role if he needs to take on a bigger role. And I think this is a defense that if you want to really get on anything, they need to take the ball away this year. And how do you take the ball away? You have more range at the safety position. And right now, they don't have a ton of range at that position. So it's going to rely on more from the pass rushers to create strip sacks and the corners when the ball's coming their way to find the football, because without that rangy safety, barring a Tony Adams breakout, that's how you get the takeaways. And they could do that. Plenty of teams in this league live like that, especially the Jets are going to play a lot of quarters coverage. They'll be able to find their takeaways with how much talent they have in the secondary and up front in the front seven. It's hard to be perfect everywhere. If you want, whether it's a Budda Baker out there on the trade market or a buyer from Tennessee, you love those kinds of things, but it's really hard in a salary cap league to be perfect everywhere. But maybe it's a situation that they go into camp, see what they have, keep an eye on roster cuts, see how the season goes. And at the trade deadline, if one of those guys is kind of sniffing around and that's kind of been your Achilles heel all season, then maybe you look to make an upgrade then.
Yeah, no doubt, man. I'm excited about the defense as a whole. I think playing with a lead, with all the talent, the explosiveness, year 2 of Sauce Gardner's exciting. But then you go back to the final piece of the puzzle, where the New York Jets have a quarterback for the first time ever, I think, because it's just like this guy's legitimate. He is a Hall of Famer. He's, this is just amazing, man. And I think the most surprising thing with Aaron Rodgers is how he holds people accountable, his leadership. Like, you heard a lot of things in Green Bay. You didn't know what was true. Then you see early on what he's doing here. I find it ridiculously impressive, man, where it's like he's helping Sauce Gardner. He's helping CJ Mosley. He's like, it's impressive, man.
It really is. And, he's got the fire back. And I don't know if it ever left, but I think he's in a place where he's so motivated and hungry. And to be fair, Robert Saleh kind of laid that floor where things are different here now. And they brought in players like Garrett Wilson and Sauce Gardner, and Mosley was here, but where they're really fired up. And Sauce won a lot of games at that Cincinnati program. Garrett Wilson won a lot of games at Ohio State. Those guys know winning. Then you bring in Aaron Rodgers. That guy knows winning. He's done it at the highest level. He knows what it takes. And everybody's going to look at him with a different level of respect and go, I'm going to follow whatever he's doing because he's won a Super Bowl. So, and he's Aaron Rodgers. Like, a lot of these guys used him in Madden. That's as far as they knew him before they met him. So I think there is just a different feel in the building when that dude is around because everybody will follow his lead. And he's also kind of understands how to interact with guys rather than being like, listen to me. It feels like a more free-flowing situation. And I think having Hackett there helps with that because there's a trust factor that Rodgers lost that trust factor in Green Bay. And it feels like with the Jets, it's been, just everyone's committed to the same goal from day one. And he's fully bought in and you really love to see it.
No, it's awesome, dude. Now, with Rodgers in the mix and all the players we just broke down, what for you is a realistic expectation for this team where, Jet fans right now are talking Super Bowl, this, that, everything else. To me, it's like, I'm thinking you got to make a legitimate run at the AFC East. Like, you've got to be in that hunt late in the season. That should be like kind of like this, probably the floor, right? I mean, you got to be 10, 11 wins, right?
That's where I have them right now. I have them right around 10, 11 wins. And there's a lot of variance because, of course, injury luck and all of those things that go on in football, and that's how it goes. But they should be competing for the division, and if not the division, they should find a way to win a wild card spot. Now, the schedule is tough. I get it. It's really tough. Everyone plays a tough schedule. They have a lot of primetime games. We'll see how they react under those lights. Nothing new to Aaron Rodgers, of course. And then the division. The division's really tough. And my rant last year, that unfortunately came to fruition in the wrong way. The week of the first New England game, I said how the Jets play against New England will decide their season. And it did. And this year it feels like you got to take care of business against New England because realistically, are you going to go 2-0 against the Dolphins or Bills? I can't confidently say that, right? I mean, it's insane to say that against the Bills, number one, that have run this division for a while now. Miami's loaded with talent. They look great. So if those series are going to be a dogfight, right? You try to win each of those games at home, and then maybe you lose the games on the road. How do you get a winning record in the division? You have to go 2-0 against New England. That's how you get to 4-2. And how you perform in your division ultimately can decide a lot of your season. So, and that's been horrible for the Jets for a long time. Yeah. So it's crazy to bullseye in on one thing for such a long season, but the Jets finally need to take care of business against New England because they haven't been able to. Yeah. And it's last year, it ultimately turned into a spiral for their season. And this year it can be the opposite. It actually can be a springboard for them to gain an upper hand in the AFC standings.
No, I completely agree. And I guess one of my last questions is Coach Saleh, man, I think there's a lot of pressure on him this year because the expectations are high for everybody. The media expects it, the fans expect it, the players expect it. We're all expecting, we just talked about it, 10 or 11 wins, right? And it's like last year, the way they ended the season pissed me off beyond, like, when you have must-win games to make the playoffs and you don't even show up. You don't show up on Thursday night. You don't show up in friggin' Seattle. You're like, how does this happen? Like the leadership, game management, all this stuff. There's a lot of pressure on him. Do you have any concerns about him having to go toe-to-toe McDermott with the division on the line or something like that?
What always gives me hope is that win at home against the Bills where they had to make a game plan to make them quarterback proof, which is to be a Super Bowl contender, on a quarterback proof plan, I would say is the hardest thing to do in the NFL. And you could poke holes, and they're justified in Saleh's shortcomings last year, right? The finish of the season was an absolute train wreck, right? Not closing out the game against Minnesota that could have really springboarded a different end of the season, things like that. The touchdown the Lions had on the leak play to the tight end that just, the defense looks stunned. Things like that could change your season. But he's also had moments in high leverage situations without anyone even close to what Aaron Rodgers is. So, you know what? It's the beauty of it now is we get to see. We get to see. The excuses are off the table. Robert Saleh is not one to, I think, search for excuses. But everybody looked at the quarterback situation last year and said that's the deficiency of this team, and it's going to really, cap our ceiling of where we can go. Now you have a limitless ceiling because of your quarterback situation, and that means the defense, things are going to be cranked up a little bit for this defense to replicate what they did last year, because if they do, this team will make the playoffs if they replicate what they did last year, because there's a floor with the offense now. And I think Saleh's, we'll see how he reacts in this situation, because this is the time to be really aggressive. What do you have to lose right now? You have Aaron Rodgers. You have a great defense. Yep. Play to win every single game. And I think he's done a good job of that, not a great job of that. And now they'll crank up, I think, that aggressive meter as well. And it's put up or shut up, like you said. Yep. I'm a Robert Saleh believer, though, and I think he's the right man for this team and this roster and this situation for the Jets.
I think having Hackett's going to help him too. A veteran coach has been there, done that. That helps.
Hands off.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have Rodgers too, who's like a coach on the field. That's definitely going to help as well. And having a quarterback that week in and week out gives you a chance to win a game where you don't have to do smoke and mirrors and run and defense, all this stuff. You can actually just win because of your quarterback, which is awesome. So if you take away your analyst hat for a second, Connor, and what is your level of excitement as a Jet fan right now? Like, I can't wait till training camp. Like, I'm excited. I'm counting down days till freaking training camp. What's your level of excitement?
Through the roof. And even for working reasons. I couldn't wait to go in to do pre and post game last year. Imagine what it's like this year, right? Yeah. You watch Aaron Rodgers play. You get to analyze this Jets offense. You get to analyze all this talent and all these pivotal matchups in these huge games, and a reignited fan base, right? I mean, I've been interacted with the Jet fan long enough to understand, when they're, and I know this life not only because I am one, but also as a Mets fan, and like when you're selling yourself on hope and when you actually have hope. And this fan base has hope, and they should have hope, because this team is loaded. They are, I think, fired up and ready to roll. They've been that way since OTAs. They have a quarterback that they believe in. They have a coach that they believe in. They have defensive talent. They have the reigning offensive and defensive rookie of the year. I mean, listen, I'm not saying it's going to be perfect. There's going to be lows, a lot of lows this season. That's football. Everybody goes through them. The Kansas City Chiefs go through them. Yep. But I think if, this is a time where me personally and the entire fan base, I can't think of a Jets preseason that I would say the last time they did Hard Knocks, going into the 2010 season, because that team in 2009 had such a special finish, and they got so much better in talent that offseason, and they had an arrogance about themselves under Rex that was incredible to watch. And it made you feel good as a Jet fan. And I think that's not always the majority of the time as a Jet fan. You don't always feel good. You actually, it could be a feeling of dread or frustration, or sometimes just bored. And I think this offseason has a little bit of, reminiscent to that offseason, where you feel a little cocky and confident, a little scared because you're always walking on eggshells, but a little cocky and confident to watch your team play.
This is the first time, like, you go down the boardwalk, you see people wearing Jets shirts. Like, you never see those, man. Like, so
or somebody like actually says something to you when you have a Jets hat on, and you're like, oh, you like, this is some excitement here.
You can go to a barbecue with your head up this time, like walk around like all proud, like we got Rodgers. It's great. So, Connor, first of all, thank you so much, man. I know it's your downtime. Problem. You're down the shore. And for those that don't know you, which everybody knows you at this point, but how can everybody find you?
Yeah, at Connor J. Rodgers on Twitter. If people still, if you're on Threads, it's the same thing on Threads. I know everybody's all over the place. Yep. We do the Badlands pod for the Jets. It's on Patreon. Stock Exchange if you like the draft for PFF, and then all the fantasy works. Everybody's getting ready for the drafts at NBC with Matthew Berry on the Fantasy Football Happy Hour on Peacock too. That'll be coming back as well. So I'm ready to roll, man. I got a little downtime for just a little bit, but I'm ready to rock.
Well, thank you again, man. I haven't talked to you in a while, so we got to do this more often, because I was sitting like, man, it's been a few years. Like, that's crazy. They're like, I don't know how this happened, but
dude, it's always great talking to you, and we're in for an exciting season. So thank you, Tyson.
And enjoy where are you down the shore at, man? Down
Manasquan.
There you go.
Always Manasquan.
Yeah. Legates?
Oh, I'll be in there at some point this week. There's a very few guarantees in life, but that's one of them.
Well, Connor, thank you again. Best of luck. Can't wait for all your shows, man. You guys are always killing it. So thank you, man.
Thanks, Tyson. Take it easy, bro.
Have a good night. All right, Connor Rodgers. Thank you guys for all watching this. We actually may have a show tomorrow night, actually, too. So stay tuned for that. I think it's going to be either 7 or 8 o'clock tomorrow night. So check that out, and I'll talk to you guys later.